I know glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm just getting a second thing.
A tripod.
Right.
Just take it out.
It's my voice, but like,
There's your mic.
okay, well, I gotta wait for this thing to start up here.
Before we get started and his PowerPoint loads, let me just tell you a little bit about David DuByne. I thought he was much shorter.
Thank you. Compliment already.
No, I started watching him probably back in 2013, I might be right.
Yeah, right when I started the channel.
And we started chatting, and he was responding to me. I was like, wow, I like that. So when I decided to have a channel, I was gonna do the same thing, and I started a Facebook page called Solar Shutdown to watch the sun. And people were interested. There were like 1,500 people in the first year, and then shortly after that, I started the Oppenheimer Ranch Project with my partner, who's not here anymore. And it was 3 years before we put up the first video about climate. So it's been 4 years since the Oppenheimer Ranch Project started, about 3 years since I put up the first video. And in that time, I watched David's channel grow, the birth of Christian Westbrook, who I tried to help. I said, dude, stop being so weird, man. And now I'm crazy, but he was a little weird in the beginning.
Oh, you're weird.
But once I spoke to him in person on Skype, and Christian, we were immediately friends. We weren't doing this for any ulterior motives except for to spread the truth. And we immediately picked up on that as humans. And because at first, like, and Christian, even after I Skyped him first, the next day he called me and said, I'm sorry. I was like, he wanted to make sure, and he did. He came, wherever he was, no one knew where he was. He came to my house. He was there the next day. And he looked around. He's like, you are you. You're you. You live in a barn. Damn. You poop in a bucket. He checked up on me. Because he'd never met anyone as honest as me who wasn't in it for something.
God, I can't see.
I'm unique. Please don't live a minute in my life. Because you might still be in the penitentiary.
If we got something here.
Yeah.
There we go.
So without further ado, I give you David DuByne.
All right, thank you. Happy we're all here today, and I remember people saying, hey, can you make something special to try to give us a greater idea where the food pricing is going? And Diamond just alluded to it. We've got these longer cycles, and this shorter one here in the 400-year period is going to affect the food production globally. So I wanted to try to give you an idea that it is a cycle. It's mathematically based, and it's a cycle. And I want to try to give you some forecasts as to where I feel the food is going to move to. So I'm going to stay right close to my computer here. And one of the first things we need to know about this is, even though there were food spikes, and this is from 1755 on the bottom, and it moves up through 1800. So I want you to remember this date here around 1785 or so. I'll show you something later on to try to connect these two. But this is Central Europe here, and they went through different areas in what Czech lands, which is the Czech Republic now, and also in Germany and Switzerland. And then they showed you how much the food prices rose depending on how good or bad the harvest was. So now this is really important to understand that it wasn't just cold and then food was expensive forever. They had price rises of 4x, quadruple food prices, and then it came back down and it was stable for a few years. And then it rose back up again. Bad harvest, but then it fell back down and food prices stabilized to somewhat similar to what they had originally today. And then bad harvest, whoosh, right back up again. It was up and down, 3x, 4x, back down again, up 4 times, down 4 times. But if your food price quadruples, that's going to have a serious effect on the economy. People will stop spending instantly on almost everything, and they'll move over and then shift their spending habits. And you can see the same thing again. This is correlated here with all the, I'm going to use my timer so I know to stay on time here. We see again, this is correlating, there's Paris down here. We got Brussels, Paris, and this is in the 1690s up to 1702. And we got Amsterdam, but you can see all of the food price rises occurred at the exact same time across Europe. But then again, after it was spiked, it normalized, and then it spiked again, and it normalized. This is kind of, you're not going to get a full-on spike, and it'll never decrease. So you're going to have some good times. So if you didn't prepare enough, In the next iteration where the prices drop, you might be able to grab some grains or get a little more preparation done inside that second cycle that comes down. And remember, we're all talking about the Maunder minimum because this is where most people believe we're going again in this area. But those charts I just showed you were right in here as they were rising out of the Dalton or the Maunder minimum, heading into the Dalton minimum. And there was still a lot of tumultuous harvests as they were exiting out, and the sun was starting to get more powerful on the cycles again to build back up into some solar activity. It wasn't right here where they had all these bad harvests. They did, but I was trying to show you that even exiting out of this Maunder minimum, it still affected the harvest to those spikes that you saw there. And I wanted to see if there's any modern examples of how this food pricing would be affected for us as we go through our economies and we buy things. The global financial crisis, remember 2008, 9, and 10, well, these soybeans, beef, rice, and maize or corn all spiked in price. And remember, if you lived it, we all remember that, what happened? Things got too expensive, people shifted their spending habits, and there was a big movement in the economy. Housing, car loans, any types of loans, credit locked up. There was a huge shaking of the economy. Now that was very temporary. What we're going into is a multi-decade event, and this is going to have some longer-term effects. So here we go. This is Bagan in Myanmar. Now these temples themselves are built on older structures. That's another time for a different discussion. But there were previous civilizations there that are built on top of. But I'm showing you here that we have the sunspots, and this is an indicator of how much activity is in the sun. And then once we map these out over longer durations of time, we start to see they're higher in activity or they're lower in activity. But then that also drives the civilization cycle in terms of higher activity for us in terms of heat on this planet. We can grow more food. And we need more food for, if you're not worried about eating, you have time to think about mathematics, art, music, engineering, and other things that help us grow our societies. But these three are tied together. And the reason I brought up Myanmar is I used to buy coffee in Myanmar. And that's what got me started into this whole Grand Solar Minimum thing. I'm somebody just like you, and my job used to be to buy Myanmar coffee. And we were finding cold weather crop losses and the killing of the new plants frozen in the fields and the farms out there, where they would overplant 12 to 14% because they were counting on the cold weather crop losses to kill off the new plantings. Now this is in Burma, Myanmar. This is not somewhere way north. This is right here at 21 degrees latitude, right in this area. The coffee buying is right over here in the Shan State. I wouldn't have ever guessed cold weather crop losses in that part of the world. So this is what was being killed off, these new plantings that they put out in the field. They were smaller plants, of course, so they're going to be super susceptible to colder temperatures. Now, with the kill-off rate here, I had to figure out what was going on because we were looking out about 5 years to figure out, is there more supply coming? Can we? You have to pay for this in advance. So you can't just get coffee production up and running. And again, you know, once you tell them that you want to get more production, they start here and they start growing out the seedlings until you get here, and they put them out in the field. It's not like, hey, we want more coffee, and they're like, okay, thanks, next week. It's no, we want more coffee, wait a year to plant, or 2 or 3 for those things to come into production. Another thing that was happening was the top leaves on these were being burnt by the cold. Top leaf kill. Made no sense to me. I was like, what? That's silver oak, by the way, for the shade cover up there on the Arabica coffee trees. And this is what they look like full grown. But the tops of these plants were getting burnt also. So their yields were down. And that's what we were looking for. This is the gold right here, Myanmar coffee. The bean density also was being affected. And what that means is it got so cold at night that when the beans were forming, the little water pockets inside would freeze into spherules of water. And after it would be, solid ice in there. But when it melted, it would have left that hole, and the holes would never fill back in. They would never grow back cellular structure-wise back and fill in. So the density of the beans was affected as well. So now we had all these three things: new plantings killed, top leaf damage, and then the bean density. And I started to look at why. Yeah. Now, I know some of you like coffee, so I thought I'd include the slide. This is double washed out here, and they have the big flats where they're drying, sun-dried. We've got the naturals here with the skins on it still, so you can get that nice flavor. And they were using Canamore 528 and Canamore P90 as a couple new varieties they were trying up there to deal with cold. Yeah, see, they understood the colds there in the Myanmar coffee farmers. So they got 2 new varietals here that they're trying to put out to resist the cold damage. And they just started these when we were there back in 2012, 13. They saw the changes and they were trying to deal with it as they move forward. So those of you who don't know who I am, I run the Adapt2030 channel on YouTube. My name is David DuByne, and I also have Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast 3 times a week. You can find that anywhere on the net where things are hosted. Now, yeah, thank you. Now, it's not a secret. We already know what's happened before, so we're not going into this blind. We have some historical records along with climate records to put it together to know where it's occurred once, and we can kind of forecast where it's going to occur again. So this is the most famous map. You always see this one, the temperature reconstruction of the Maunder minimum. And when you look at the record cold temperatures occurring today, the coldest ever recorded ever in the history of the United States, the massive floods, they're all lining up right in these exact areas that cooled before, and discernibly on the map, you can see it. Morocco, record snows, record cold. We got up here as well, Norway right at the edge there, and then we got the loss of crops in the Ural Mountains right now. Oh my gosh, Greenland's heating, it's getting warm. Well, it got warmer back then too. Alaska is heating, oh, it's global warming. Well, wait a second, it got warmer in the Maunder minimum there. Huh? They're riding on a natural cycle. They're trying to capture your attention by riding a natural cycle and blaming everything else in between it. Now, I make bold calls where the food crops are going to be lost. Remember this, I did this one back in 2017. I even circled on the map where they're going to lose crops. Oh my gosh, right there, North Korea, you know, they're having the massive famine right now there because of loss of crops. And Heilongjiang, this is an area I reference all the time in my talks. Heilongjiang, that's a major wheat growing area in northern China. They're losing production left, right, and center this year. So it's kind of easy to pinpoint through history where the losses are because the losses occurred there before too. So it's just like mapping through history. It's not, and I'm trying to do the temperature study with the science as well as historical accounts. And we got this big yellow thing off to the left there, and they say it has no effect on our climate. Well, where's our Earth? Where's the Earth in this thing? Yeah, where do you see it? Which one of these planets is the Earth, do you think? Yeah, we got it right there, that little one. Right, but in the scale of it, you understand that that thing's 1 million times plus bigger than our own Earth. And then you look out at it, and they're real nice. Here's our current solar cycle, and we're way down here. Actually, it's lower than the red line. The forecasts were off. But then when we couple a couple of these solar cycles together, going back, 45 years or so with 4 solar cycles, then we can couple it and take that back into the 1800s, and they're just iterations of each other. That whole thing here going back over 300 years, that's just that little small box there. So you can map out the solar cycles and the activity, and each feeds into the next one in terms of the intensity. And here it's warmer there. It's warmer in the Minoan warming, medieval warming period, warmer. That's a 4,000-year climate chart. But in what we look at in terms of hundreds of years, just this little square on the end. We need to go way back in history to take a look. We can figure it out. Because bad stuff happens when the weather gets cold. And I know it's too small. I can barely read this thing right here. But let me go ahead and I'll try to point out a few things here for you. The Harappa civilization collapses right through here. And then we got the Yuan dynasty collapsing. The Mycenaeans are collapsing. What is it when we're dropping in temperature? You get all these collapses along the way. When we're increasing in temperature, we get up to the climate optimum, the Romans and the Chinese, the Han dynasty flourishing at these apex periods. But as soon as we start dropping, we get the collapse syndrome happening. Yuan dynasty collapses. The Han dynasty collapse right here. When we get to these bottom troughs and peaks, once we start coming out, good things happen again. When we drop, bad things happen, and we are dropping again. So we got the starvations, the plagues, the end of the Roman Empire right through here. Whoosh, medieval warming period, expansion of the Vikings, expansion of wine production in the UK, or England, which you know now, Scotland. Then we come back down to the Maunder minimum. We got the plagues, the collapses of dynasties, empires, and everything in between. It's all related on solar. The history of our world is dictated by the amount of solar activity we get. And then these are other ones like the Akkadian collapse, and it just goes through. Every time there's a drop in solar activity, it wipes out civilizations that were the most advanced of their time. You realize that. That's a cycle. It's always the most advanced, ever. Now, through these historical wipeouts and crazy things happening and just decimation of society and food price rises, there always has to be a culprit, Now, this is a proxy data for the execution of witches. Now, they weren't just burned, they were hung, they were drowned, they did horrible things to people back then. But one of the weirdest proxies that I found out of all my studies is where they had killed witches after trials. You'll find that you're looking for the most extreme weather shifts based on this map, because they wouldn't have killed all those people there unless the weather was extremely something off to the uber outside of change that they never experienced before. So as we look back through, we know we're going to see the losses in Spain, like Almeria right now. All the greenhouses getting destroyed from wind, hail, cold, loss of crops and shortages in the UK because what they couldn't grow in Spain. So we're seeing all types of incredible record snows, record hail, record rain, all through the same area here, all the way down into Croatia, Slovakia, Slovenia, all here. And it's matching up perfectly with what today's weather shifts are. This is where they killed the witches because they thought the witches were responsible for the weather. So when we come here, we'll start to see the matchups again. So if it's not happening now, you could almost expect it to get more tumultuous around the Netherlands based on what happened in the historical cycles. And again, you know, NASA, never a straight answer, always so pretty with their charts. Like, look how perfect that is. That's perfection in the magnetic field lines on our Earth. So pretty. Ooh, nice graphics. It looks so tame, doesn't it? But when we get here, this is really what the sun's magnetic field lines look like. Yeah, that's pretty not so pretty as in such. Now let's put those two together. And you start to see how these field lines interacting can really affect our weather systems, magnetosphere, and drive and push jet streams and all types of things on our planet. Now, this is really the interconnection that they don't want you to see, because that sun is 1.2 million times larger than the Earth. Of course, electromagnetically connecting is going to have an enormous effect on us. We're a little tiny dot. You saw that chart, right? I do remember that I showed you the dot, the smallness of it. Now here's our sun right here, and we're 1 astronomical distance away from it, 1 AU. The magnetic field of the sun goes out 100 AU. We are so close into that sun. Whatever it changes, we're going to change fast. You know, you got clear out here at the bow shock, termination shock. That's 100 AU out, 100 times further than we're being affected magnetically. And again, that's where we are down here, and this is what's happening with our climate, and this is a lot of the shifts. Now I want to come back here to central England, and you can see when we have low solar activity, follow the arrow down, we get these drops in temperature. Again, here we got low solar activity, we get drop off in temperature. We're expecting another drop off in solar activity. This is affected when the solar activity drops off. This right here, this drives society. Who was it? Kissinger said, I don't care if you control the money system, let me control the food, because if I control the food, I control the society. And that is well spoken and very true. This is what happens when food prices spike or are not available. We get tumultuous results in the stock market unless you're positioned in a certain way to take advantage of food price rises. We're going to get the food price spikes, which is going to spook people in their spending habits and shift. Then we got civil unrest. Venezuela is coming to a country near you soon, because we're going to get empty shelves rolling into 2023. And I'm going to stick by that call. And I'll never forget my friend. He's like, hey, David, I have my son's in 5th grade. He just started 5th grade. Can you make a graphic to explain it to him? So this is what I created here. Like the different facets of the diamond. We got the jet streams going out of flow, the atmospheric compression, rain events, the loss of agriculture, the sun going to sleep. Diamond talked about cosmic rays. We got the volcanoes, massive floods. That's only one part. Now, what's going to happen with the media? This is the important part. What to expect moving forward. The media is going to try to distract you so you don't see what's happening. They're going to go into overdrive to try to distract you. Absolutely. And it's not going to be a little one. It's going to be Hollywood-esque, everything unfurling at this time. There's going to be more surveillance of the police state and your social media. And I was told firsthand, your social media is to track you to see if you'll be a threat during this time. Your social profiles, who you're connected with, what you're talking about online, what you're doing, they're assessing your threat by using your social media profile along with your banking information. Now, what I've also noticed is the media in these last couple of months is in overdrive to assure you that everything is stable, that nothing's changing. Your intuitive abilities are waking up and you're starting to notice changes, but the media is swinging back saying, no, there's no change. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. They're in overdrive to assure you that everything's stable. And, you know, once you understand that it's not stable, you might behave differently. So I show this chart a lot. Whoever's watched my videos, you see this one. The magnetic waves, once they get to this point here at their widest point, they're canceling each other out. And this is where the instability is happening magnetically. There's about a 2-year lag on this one. Nobody's sure if it's 2 years or 3 years. But what you're seeing here, these longer, the more interference pattern causing more solar shutdown, if you will. What we're experiencing is actually just this little part here. We haven't jumped into the big changes yet. There's still a little bit of delay in that. And then where did that chart come from? Well, it came from Valentina Zarkova and her team in the UK trying to put this together. And they were using a quadrupole model, which is 4 magnetic fields. You know, we have a north and a south, pretty easy to understand. But the sun has a quadrupole. And what I mean by that is it's layered and it's 4 different poles on there. You got 1, 2, 3, 4. I tried to match these up the best I could. And then they said, well, there's a missing component. What is the missing component? Well, it's this, the magnetic torus field that surrounds the quadrupole. So I tried to put this together to give you a good representation. I created this graphic because I didn't see anything out there to explain it. Now I want to make this thing move, and I want to animate it where the layers of the sun are moving in the quadrupole, and then also you can see the torus wave encapsulating that. Now once Zarkova and her team added in the magnetic torus field on top of that quadrupole, then they pretty much got 100% statistical correlation. But it took this extra component of the magnetic torus to get them to that statistical, we're on it. Nobody has disproved their math yet. That's the scary thing. If they would have made a mistake, they'd have been jumped on, vilified, and everybody would have tried to, they can't undo their math. Their math is scary because it's so precise. Also, we can see how fast these are the fields on the sun when they're flipping from north to south, and the intensity, like how much energy is coming out during the flip from north to south, south to north on the pole in the sun. So the activity state, obviously you see right here, that's a really active sun. Now we're coming up, and this is the solar cycle we're in now, and shoot, it's supposed to just drop off a cliff by solar cycle 25 and 6. It's going to be a rapid descent. It's not going to trickle. We're not trickling into this one. We're going to drop off. You look how steep that drop is. If this is 25, that's 26 at the bottom. If we're at the end here, there's going to be this rollover point between the next few years where we're going to drop straight off into the cooling, and it's going to be rapid. It's going to be incredibly fast. It's going to take me off guard too, and I'm right in the center of this. I am unprepared. Truly, how fast this is going to slow out and throw. So, secondly, if there were things happening, we should be seeing signs around us to verify is this true or not true. Well, this was put out about 8 months ago. A lot of you have seen this one. But they were predicting here we would go into the coldest ever recorded for the thermosphere. Well, that's actually blasted below there. We're at the lowest ever recorded now. So the projections of going into this cool phase, this is from NASA. This is not from like a random website somewhere. This is NASA and their atmospheric physicists talking about the space age cooling. And we've actually dropped here into the all-time record now. It's been confirmed. All-time record cold in the thermosphere. Now, how was it explained to me? And I'm trying to explain it back to you. The sun has a charge and the earth has a charge, and they're different. We got positive charge and negative, like a battery. You got the positive and negative on the two sides. The sun is stepping down in its state of activity. So if this is going to shrink in electrical intensity, if you will, we're still too highly charged here. We're going to have to equalize somehow. So what would you do if one has too much excitation in it? It's going to have to discharge somewhere. And if it's truly happening, we should see other discharge patterns and strange things that verify also this electrical connection trying to equalize within the atmosphere or within the upper reaches of our, going clear up into the ionosphere. It's called the global electric circuit. And if there's differences in electrical connectivity, electromagnetic coupling of our Earth and the sun, we should really start to see changes in this. And we are. Look at this. We got an enormous amount of upward lightning now. There's way beyond what's expected. I mean, it used to be incredibly rare, but now every single storm has this. It's insane what's going on with the ground to sky lightning that's occurring. And the amount of sprites, they used to be rare, like you never saw a sprite before. Now, almost literally 100% of thunderstorms and electrical storms have sprites associated with them. People are just snapping them every day now.
What is the reason for the ground to air?
Well, it's trying to equalize its charge. So think about that again. We're coming back. There's two different charges here. The Earth's charged negatively, and the sky, that electric circuit's charged positive. So there's trying to be equalization, and something's overcharged. So when you hear these sky sounds, a lot of sky noises these days, they think it has something to do with this equilibrium charge balancing going on, because the differential between the charges is driving something. So it wouldn't make, whatever's in the crust could have, whatever crystalline structures in the crust, it could have something to do with the sounds, because they use, the radio crystals back in the old days in the 50s, they used to use a crystal inside there, right? To be able to, so if it's a crystalline surface, of course, you're going to get some sound resonance coming out of that. And also these blue jets, rare before, and now we're starting to see exceptional electrical connectivity, the upper reaches of the atmosphere, which we haven't seen before. Now also, who's Steve? Remember somebody yesterday was talking about, hey, my name's Steve. Yeah. Here's your electrical rope coming out, going into glow mode off the plasma filament. Now, this was only discovered in 2017. A new person named it because they found it 2017. And since 2017, it's occurred 3 more times, but each successive time is more intense. Now we can actually see the field aligned currents wrapping in on themselves there in the plasma filament.
Where were those photographs taken?
One was Russia and 2 were Canada, and the first was Canada as well. So the 3 Canadian instances, and then this one was in Russia. But look how intense. You can actually see the field aligned currents coming down in a plasma filament. It's insane. And then we got the picket fence auroras coming off the filament structure. You got to tell me that this was only discovered in 2017, and then we got 3 more instances, and they're getting heavier each time we come down in iteration. There's definitely an uptick. And again, you talked about squatter man. Well, right there we got the middle column of the squatter man already visible in our skies. The intensity plasma ram, but there's something going on. Because I'll bring you back to that there again. Like this thing right here, if it started to get those arms like we see in the petroglyphs, that's it. That's the center body right there of that. So the center body structure is already being shown visibly in our atmosphere. So what's going on? We got at least a part of squatter man visible now. Now, it didn't stay visible for so long. Also, if there's real changes, we should start to see changes in the solar wind, and we are. This comes from Smash-O-Mash. Daniel Nigro, if you want to follow his channel, excellent source for space weather as well. Smash-O-Mash, Daniel. He showed me these, gave them to me. Solar wind. Obviously, we get the pressure coming off, wrapping in our Earth, keeping our magnetosphere nice and tight, well, as tight as it can be. And then right here, no solar wind. Whoosh, everything let off and it's puffy. And I thought, well, when did this occur? Oh, January 12th of this year. This is years ahead of where it should be. And if we look at the plasma density too in the solar wind, we start to see the same thing. You can see here clearly where the wind is pushing in, and you can see our magnetosphere right there. The wind is pushing, solar wind's pushing and creating this collapse, which is nice and tight around our Earth. And then down here, we have no solar wind. We get that whoosh, puff off again. This shouldn't be happening right now. This is years ahead of the predicted forecasts of at least solar wind shutdowns and slowdowns. And then you notice that whenever, I'll talk about cosmic rays for a second, but I'm going to skip past this pretty quick because others will talk about it. But we get the high cosmic rays when we get to the low of the solar cycle, but there's about a 9-month delay lag on this too. So right at the peak, it's not exactly at the peak, it's offset by a few months because the sun will send something out, but the Earth's systems don't instantly react to it. There's a lag time there. And what does that mean for us? Well, we're going to be heading up an incredibly high cosmic ray density coming up. This is where we are now. They're forecasting to come up here somewhere. And the amount of cloud cover is going to be incredible moving through. Now, just a quickie thing here. This is how cosmic rays actually create clouds. Photochemistry, and they come in with a positive charge, and then that's enough to create other chemical changes that then will bring you over to cloud droplets and nucleation occurring. And this, as it moves out from the cosmic ray, interacting chemically, photochemically, will create different charged particles, and they'll start binding to each other. and boom, at the end we get clouds. And that's all it's about, really. And you know, they're finding that the effects now are 7x more with this cascading effect that they're finding with cosmic rays, like a 7x increase. That's huge. Clouds doubling would be massive, but clouds 7 times, that's going to be, you know, 1,000-year floods every time. And again, you know, you might have seen this one, the cosmic rays continue to increase. This is here over in Northern Europe, when we're looking up in Norway and Sweden area. And again, if we stay here right in the United States, you notice that some areas, especially up in Maine, are getting a much higher reading faster than in places like California, which is more of a steady increase of just a couple %. But it seems like these more northern latitudes, like Norway, Sweden, Maine, etc., these cosmic rays are increasing more in the northern hemisphere in the upper reaches of upper latitudes versus lower latitudes. Now, the magnetic North Pole in motion, if you will. This here is one of my favorite ones because it goes from 200 AD, which the pole was over Russia in 200 AD, and then it swung back and did its drunken dance all the way through 1500 AD, about 500 years ago. So we know where the magnetic pole moved from 200 AD up to 1500 AD, and this is what it did during those centuries and millennia. But remember, it went all the way here to 200 AD, and look, it's tracking toward the exact same spot right here. So I'm thinking about a 2,000-year matchup in cycles here, because wherever it's going and it's increasing, it's going to end up right here, and that's real interesting because 200 AD, it was in the exact same place almost. Literally less than 100 miles away on the track it's at now. Coincidental? Perhaps, not sure. But the European Space Agency stopped producing any more results after January of 2016. Why? Not sure, but the magnetic pole has shifted. You can see where it was in the year 2000. It was about here, and right now it's in the center of the Arctic. And then what we just heard, it seems like it shifted right over into land again, which would be terrifying because that is such a fast shift. We would not be able to cope with that. Now, the link between the low cloud cover and the galactic cosmic rays, I mean, this correlation here, if that doesn't show you anything, well, I'll take a deeper look in. Heinrich Svensmark's the guy you want to look at for this information. For sure, Heinrich Svensmark, he goes through where we are in the galactic arm, the changes that occurred, and then how much watts are reflected back in space if we get to certain types of clouds. And they're generally right here, this 15,000 to 18,500 foot range is where this new cloud layer is blending in or bending in. And again, Cloud Mystery is the name of the film you want to watch. It's free on YouTube. Heinrich Svensmark. Once you watch the Cloud Mystery, that'll explain a lot more things that'll make sense to you on why these atmospheric compression events and once in a 1,000-year floods seem to be occurring daily. Now, with all this electromagnetic connection and loosening of our magnetosphere, of course, our cloud bands are going to shift. We got the jet streams moving. The cloud bands are going to start shifting and moving more north or south, depending on how history has worked itself out. But we also know through peer-reviewed research, I mean, there are thousands of papers on this. I pulled one that's a pretty easy to understand chart here. It just shows the galactic cosmic rays on a weakened magnetosphere, how much the intertropical convergence zone will move and where it will move. So some areas will get more rain, some areas will get less rain. So the ICTZ, or during the Little Ice Age and the Maunder Minimum, pushed more south. Now we're expecting another push as well, south. So these areas got wetter in the Little Ice Age, so we're looking at places in Africa. Some other places got drier, like Venezuela, and northern parts of Brazil got drier as this intertropical convergence zone moves.
And with the no color, is that mostly unaffected?
No, this is just where the actual bands of the flow in the atmosphere are. No, ICTZ is not anywhere up here. It's just on the equatorial bands. So they were just showing you where does it move. They used a couple different types of proxy. They went into caves, and those things that grow off the cave roof, stalactites, they cut them open. They're like tree rings. You can see how much water was seeping through, and they could get real wet periods or real dry periods. Also, when they go to alpine lakes, they drill down and they find how much pollen's in there, because more pollen means more plants. Less pollen means less plants. And then they can determine the species of the plant because the pollen has its own signature. Also, the jet streams are behaving strangely, which is also expected. That's not bend. That's not easy bend. That's just almost vertical. And then what we saw over the UK, actually, when I was speaking last week, the jet streams went vertical. That's not right. There should be some undulation in them. I saw a strong bend here that looked really strange, so I put this in when I was doing my presentation. But now it's vertical pretty much, and that's a problem. If we got vertical jet streams, that explains the equatorial vortex and all this heat you hear about. Oh, it's hot in the Arctic. Well, you got a vertical thing pulling off the equator straight up. Well, that's the cold one, but right here, straight up into the Arctic. That's coming from the equator. That should be pushed down and separated, but now the vertical jet streams are allowing incredible pockets of heat. But don't worry, the media already has an excuse for you. They already had it for you. Oh, they're trying to explain how this is working and that's working. The jet stream should have this undulation and U pattern. This should look something like that, but not vertical. Not vertical. I'm sorry, that's just something wrong here. But it would be expected. And again, you know, I showed this slide in one of my videos before. People liked it. Everything is warming faster than the rest of the Earth. So when we start here, Singapore is heating up twice as fast as everywhere else on the planet. Spain is warming faster than the rest of the world. Global warming is happening twice as fast in Alaska. It's happening twice as fast in Australia. Sweden's twice as fast. Adirondacks here in the US twice as fast. Canada twice as fast. Europe twice as fast. Mountains twice as fast. Berlin twice as fast. China twice as fast. Where's that other one at? Oh, South Africa twice as fast. And then Switzerland twice as fast. What is that? They went around the entire planet saying everything's warming twice as fast as everywhere else. So the whole planet's warming twice as fast as itself, basically. Yeah, and the reason I want to go in and talk about the heat is because this is the excuse they're trying to give you for all the record snowfalls this year. You know, if it really was a heated ocean creating more evaporation, creating record cold and record snow, which is the story, then we should have seen the same thing in 1998 with the massive, most incredible El Nino ever seen before. Temperatures spiked right here, and please keep this in mind. I'm trying to give you a time reference here, because the evaporation excuse is what they're telling you right now to be able to explain record snowfall. When we come here and we take a look, this is off University of Alabama, Huntsville, the UAH data set. Here's that spike I just showed you before, and here was the peak of it. Well, it's only about not even a half a degree warmer. No, it's a tenth of a degree warmer here than here. Why didn't we see record snowfall here if evaporating oceans were the cause of all the record snow? We should have seen it at the exact same time because the heat's nearly identical. It's a tenth of a degree difference. So we should have seen record snow and record cold back in the 90s, but we didn't because it's a different mechanism driving the whole system right now, this Grand Solar Minimum. Now, again, they can take a look at Australia and we take a look at Indonesia and we see where it got cooler during those times. So we can forecast out which crops are grown in which areas, which crops are going to decrease in yields, and you can start to map it out around the world. Well, Australia is going to start to get really wet. And the reason I said, remember that first chart I showed you and I said, hey, keep your eye on the 1780s? Well, this is what was happening in Asia in the 1780s. They had massive droughts. So if food prices are spiking in Europe because of crop losses in the same time period, we know it happened in Europe and it happened in Asia. But Asia got drier and Europe got wetter. So we can start to map all these things out, which areas across the planet will have which effect and which crops are grown, and we'll know which governments are going to have trouble struggling to feed their people. Now, Indonesia is importing 250 million tons of rice at the moment. They're storing it, and they already know what's going on. So if truly we were going to get more rainfall and these things were happening, then we should start to see increased rainfalls across all these places in the world. So what we have here, this is Ayers Rock, Uluru, yeah, out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the Australian outback. These are waterfalls coming off from last year, and they had record rains each year, breaking the last record. And 2019 is absurd with the amount of water coming down. This is the outback now. It's becoming a verdant field, pasture land. All of northern Australia and central Australia are becoming green pasture lands again. Formerly deserts a few years ago. Now the water's coming back. If you look at the Sierra Nevada snowpack here too, this is massive. That is a massive change in one single year. The drought is no longer in California because they have so much snowpack and so many cubic miles of water that has poured down this year in the form of snow. Now they're even reclassifying these arc storms here. They're going a 5+ now. It's going to be a 5+. And they're trying to identify and show you these arc storms coming off the Pacific. They already know they're going to get more intense. So they're starting to reclassify it at a higher level to explain it away. They are going to have an explanation for you. But what does this mean? Well, these arc storms are going to be pouring so much more water over the coastal range there that you would expect other areas to have effects. And this is just this week, this map came out. So the dark purples are the latest ever recorded spring blooms. It's the latest spring has ever started and when leaves came to the trees. So the dark purples are the latest spring ever recorded, but the dark greens are the earliest spring ever recorded. So these arc storms blasting into California, they're getting an enormous amount of new rain and moisture right along the Sierra Nevada range, dipping over into the Four Corners area. That moisture is now making it over the range and really starting to bloom out a lot of stuff early, which is in a desert area, if you will. But then up here, it's getting dry and they're having really cold temperatures and just nothing's, the potato industry up there is gone, decimated this year. And then we got right here, again, latest spring on record, but that's kind of right down in the Kansas wheat area. And then right through the Smoky Mountains and that kind of range there, we get the earliest spring ever again. So what's going on with these temperature fluctuations and why are they so close to each other? Latest spring ever on record, earliest spring ever on record, a few hundred miles away from each other. So that's how much difference is going on, please.
I just noticed an anomaly in Florida and in California. Now, I can understand California because of elevation, but Florida from Lake Okeechobee, there's that hook going up almost to Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, that'll be the earliest. That'll be the earliest on record. I mean, something down here is getting more precipitation, warmer temperatures earlier in the season.
But there's the darkness is what I'm talking about. So most of Florida is early.
Yeah, because that's a dark green that you're looking at right here on this spot.
So that's just very early?
That's very early, wetter, earlier. Plants are blooming earlier in these areas. But again, look how much purple there is. Just view across the United States how much lateness there is in there versus how much earliness there is in there. There's a huge difference, right? A huge amount of the United States is late, and it's going to get later each year as we move forward. And if it's going to get earlier, you could expect it to even get earlier as we move forward. So whatever's happening, either drying or wetting, it's going to amplify and it's going to continue on its trend from this point forward. So the trends are already starting to show themselves in different areas. Now, for you all who were looking for specifics, so I've had a couple requests. Dug in, I found this one. This is the amount of moisture above the averages here for this same time period right now, talking about the arc storm increases. So when we look at these dark blues, this is much more rainfall in these areas. So I had some specific questions about the Four Corners area coming out off of California after the range was coming with the arc storms. So anywhere you're looking at greens and blues, you're looking at an enormous amount of new rain activity and record rains and moisture patterns forming in these same areas. So obviously these areas are going to get greener and they'll become new grow zones. Which brings me to my next one here. These were the floods that took out 30% of America's stored grain crop. This is what they normally look like, the river systems, and this is what they filled to during that time. This is not normal. This is the highest amount of rainfall ever recorded with the most days of Mississippi River in flood stage ever recorded. And that goes back to the early 1800s, not like 1880. The number of flood days have been recorded back in the 1790s on the Mississippi River. And we're at the highest ever. So that's another couple 100-year cycle. These are the destroyed grains, and this is kind of what our American grain crop looks like at the moment. This is what our fields look like at the moment. They're not getting in their planting this year, not even close. But the size of the waterway is exploding in size. Like you get this is the normal one, but then look at this. That is a gargantuan shift in water, the amount of water that's coming down. But we're not just seeing it in the U.S. Iran, anywhere that's blue, is the all-time highest recorded floods ever recorded in Iran. You got to remember they had accounts of the Silk Road traders at that time. That's how far back their records go, to Silk Road trading days. And this is still the most rain they've ever recorded, ever. So this is a 2,000-year plus cycle they're looking at, 2,500 years of the most rainfall. And this is kind of what it's looking at in Afghanistan as well. Some of these rivers here haven't had water in them in 2,000 years. and this is the amount of flooding going on. It's not just a little bit of extra water. This is how much is coming down in the driest places on the planet. There is an extreme shift going on in our atmosphere at the moment. And then again, we look, you know, there's the Afghanistan, like all that blue area is what I just showed you right here. That's the blue that you're seeing on the map right there. So when they're talking about these areas, Kandahar and all this area, Northwest especially is where all the old temples and pagodas and forts and that kind of stuff, they were all abandoned because they ran out of water, but the water's coming back thousands of years later now. Saudi Arabian deserts. This is how much water's come down this year. Saudi Arabian camels in verdant fields of flowers all across the Middle East. This is not located to a single region. This is everywhere across the driest regions of our planet. Year worth of rain in United Arab Emirates one day. This turned there in the driest, this is in the desert in the UAE. And here we go. This is the floods in a year's worth of rain in a day. And this seems to be the new ramp up. A year's worth of rain, several months worth of rain, all coming down at the same time. And here we go. This is Yemen and Oman. Lakes are forming in the desert in Oman. Usually look at one cyclone every 7 years, one, but they've had 3. They were getting 1 a month, and that's how these lakes were able to form. So something shifted in their patterns as well. Atacama Desert, the world's driest place, period, hands down. There's no other place drier in the world. Second year in a row where the blooms are here. Look at these flower blooms from all the excessive new rain coming in. Death Valley flooded this year. Right? So this rain pattern shift across all the driest areas of the world, if you have a crystal ball and you know past cycles, you could say, hey, these are going to become new growths. Now, maybe not Atacama, but other areas in the Sahel. Now, what I did here, this is a precipitation map. Now, the bigger the cross is, the more moisture was pouring down between 4,000 and 6,000 years ago. So what they've done is they reconstructed the amount of rainfall coming down over the last, and this is mid-Holocene, around 4,000 to 6,000 years ago on this map. And here's the Chinese investment map as well. It's an interactive Chinese investment map. So I was starting to look and say, hey, there's a lot of rainfall here. And then I go, oh, there's a lot of Chinese investment there. I go, oh, look in the middle of Chad. That's going to be a new lake basin that will fill. Oh, look at all the Chinese investment that's right in that same area there. Wow, that's interesting. What about North Africa? Oh, they're up there too, same spot. What about Libya and everything? Oh, same spots. Oh, wait a second. Somebody knows something going on. So wherever you see a cross on this means increased rainfall on a certain frequency pattern, several thousand years. So I overlaid those two, and you can start to see wherever the dots are, those are Chinese investment projects. Now, it's a little statistical impossibly to be up here where you have all these areas in the middle of the desert surrounded by these. It's not coincidental. They know the patterns are repeating. And everywhere you look, you get the 100% match here. You got all the matches through here. You got the match in Morocco, clear out in Mauritania. You got the whole river basin getting, you know, rail lines connecting all this through here. You got all, what are they doing in the middle, literally the middle of the desert? And they're putting investment project, oh, it's going to get rainier in there. Well, of course, they're connecting all these areas here for grow zones. Oh, up here in Sudan, are you kidding me? It's been dry for centuries up. Why did they go there suddenly? And then all this whole port area here, obviously, and then you come down into, you know, Tanzania further down. But what I found really startling is once I found this is a 7,000-year drainage basin map, when these used to be big lakes 7,000 years ago in the mid-Holocene called the African megalakes. What I found even more startling is when I overlapped it, it was too busy. I need to like take the time to maybe make that different colors so you could see it. But some of these larger investment projects from the Chinese are lying on what would be the larger rivers filling into some of these mega lakes. So they're placing themselves on the dry riverbeds of some of these that are going to refill and become some of the largest waterways and tributaries as the deserts start to bloom again. That's what I found most interesting, is some of these are right on the biggest waterways that are going to be forming up there in this new place. Somalian floods. This is what I'm talking about. This is the area in Somalia. So you can see this type of rainfall coming down is excessive and massive. It's shifting. Now, these are coming from 2017. Do you see anything strange in these photos? This is last year and this year. Yeah. Elephants in snow, not something I'm used to seeing. This is in Southern Africa as well. Zimbabwe and South Africa both with these excessive snows. Also going over into you can get over on the coastal area too in Namibia, and they saw some excessive all-time record cold in Windhoek and a few other places this year. This is the desert southwest of the United States, Saguaro cactus covered in snow. You don't see that too often. Giraffes playing in the snow, it's kind of an outlier. But all this is happening in the same year right now in the last few months, in the winter. So if I was smart in China and I'd set up all my new investment projects to take advantage of all the wet new areas, what I would do is I'd have to protect that, and I have to arm my fleet to protect my food supply. And then we got the string of pearls straight out of here. And, you know, it's actually going to be coming from here. They added a new port system in here. So we got the string of pearls. All they're going to do is deliver the food right back to Myanmar and then send it across to Kunming right here. Now, China created a new food grow zone. This one goes offline. North Korea, all these places go offline. But look, they're going to find new food grow zones here and deliver it back. This is their plan. This is what's planned. And also, what I learned in the UK last week when I went to Alternative View 10, I never heard about the European Neighborhood Policy or the integrated EU Defense Force. Never heard about it. It's not the EU Army. That's the wrong lexicon. They want you to use that one. It's an integrated interoperability defense force. It's not an army, a defense force integration between all those nations. And where are they going next? They're going down in here. That's where they're headed to. So the entire United EU integrated military and defense force is actually going to start going through this area and placing troops down here. They're having a real difficult time figuring out how to start the draft because they don't have enough people. And part of the reason Brexit, they don't want the EU to exit out, is because they're going to lose this stronghold here. They need the UK inside their defense force to make it legitimate. There's two different intergovernmental operating bodies that are forcing and wanting this whole area here occupied by EU troops. And we see it again here with the Union for the Mediterranean, and we see it with the neighborhood policy and the integrated EU defense force. Why are they all focusing on these same areas here? I just showed you it's greening. Chinese are there. Now the Europeans want to go there. What? This is the Roman grain growing map where they used to grow crops. So this is 14 AD, and you can see the road system that the Romans had all the way through North Africa. And these are also the grain growing belts that the Romans had to grow grains across the same areas. Now, it's a little coincidental. The rain's falling there. These places are turning green. We got two massive military structures are going to be in there, China and the EU Integrated Defense Force, all vying for the same grain growing areas that were proven that they grew grain there to supply the Roman army and this Roman civilization at the time. It's a little coincidental that all those are matching up and overlapping. Now, the last thing, people said, hey, David, I think you went a little too far with this one. I don't think so. If you're going to take over this area to grow food, you're not going to want the local men there to be defending it. No army has ever successfully gotten into North Africa and stayed because they are ferocious fighters, and I'll give them props. Those guys are tough. They only know how to defend their countries. They don't stop, and they will defend it to the death. Those guys are so strong over there. And here they are. They got them to go voluntarily out of their own neighborhoods and grow zones and send them up to Europe by offering them. How do you get those defenders out of your country? You give them free, whatever it is, to get them out of there, because millions of men have gone up to Europe and they're not coming back. It's a one-way ticket, and they use the NGOs to run them across the Mediterranean. So they took maybe a possible military force of 1 million or 2 million defenders out of the equation by sending them up to Europe. So when they go down there with their defense force and the Chinese armies running around down there, there's going to be very little resistance this time. Like, this is a carefully calculated plan. And if it's happening in this particular area, I want to know what's going on with the rest of the Ukraine, and I want to know what's going on with Turkey, and what the hell's happening in Myanmar, because everywhere you look geopolitically, you're starting to see the same kind of like super long play chess game going out to get food grow zones. And here we got, these are the two. Now notice their insignias. I mean, it goes all over. It's essential, but it's covering. And then again, you know, this, you see the same thing with the eagles, and it's always the same symbology. Got the movement on the coordination of center of Europe, the MCCE. This is part troops going to control here, and then we got the defense policy down here. That's all the Europeans combining on their defense force. Remember this, European neighborhood policy, this is going to give them legitimacy to run into these countries and occupy and hold. And as I was explained to me, if they do get these areas up and running and they can use the primary water sources from Libya, this grain growing area will exceed all of North America in terms of tonnage coming out. They will produce more grain than the United States and Canada combined in this area because the growing conditions are much better for grains on a faster return out. They're actually going to get more grain than entire North America produces out of this area here. So if we go offline and China goes offline and many areas start to decline, they're looking at this area here, parts of the Middle East and over into Iran and Pakistan to grow the new food to feed our cultures and our world. But who's going to get that food? That's my question, my ultimate question. So I'm almost out of time. I got 5 minutes. I'm going to try to wrap up. The planetary geometry here at 79 AD matches almost within a degree or so of the 2024 alignments. Now you got all the forged gas giants out here in a pair, in parallel pairs, and then the Earth sandwich right in the middle. So I call it like a magnetic Earth sandwich. But again, we see the parallel pairs exactly to the degree with the parallel with the Earth sandwich magnetically right in between that. That is a 2,000-year cycle. When we keep coming back to the rainfalls on a 2,000-year cycle. So what's going on with the planetary geometry and the rainfalls are matching on multi-millennial cycles? There's too much coincidence going on for it to be just a random thing. And this is the kind of points I put together. The North American snowfall, I mean, look, it's so far above the standard deviations, it's got to have its own new ranges built in there. That's from 2017-18. Look how far out of the range it is above the normal. 2018-19, it happened again, but a little bit earlier in the season. Notice where the peak is compared to here. It's pushed back a month or two. But they got to have the ready-made excuse that it's evaporating oceans. Greenland ice. We come here, 2015-16. The blue line is well above the baseline average for the 30-year averages from 1990 to 2013, way above the average. They tried to explain it. Again, it's evaporating oceans. What happened again in 2016-17, but look at it. Wow, so far above, so shockingly, astonishingly above. And then this year, 2017-18, totally above again. Now, those pages are gone. They don't exist on the net anymore. They erase that information, so you're not able to access it. Offline. So you have to go to Polar Portal on the back door to find this info. And they don't show you those charts anymore. They're starting to present the information like this. So when we look at, the 2012-13 melt season, we got way down in the incredible. Look how low the melt got. I mean, way down at what? -16 gigatons a day coming down. Look how low the melt was in 2013. When we come back here, that was a 2017-18 melt season. We stay above pretty much the 30-year average on melt. But here, look how low it was below in 2012-13. And they're still trying to tell you it's gaining ice up there. It makes no sense. And again, the reason I try to explain the problem is we have the biggest opportunity in human history in front of us. There's going to be more opportunity to find your niche, provide value, grow your businesses, grow whatever you'd like to grow during this time, because more people are going to need more services, goods, and whatever. Consulting could be a million things in between the change from here to there, because there's going to be more change that has occurred in the last few thousand years with the most people on the planet there's ever been. So this is the hugest opportunity in human history. So please don't look at it as, oh, we're going to die and we're all going to starve to death and fight to the death by knives to get food. It's not going to be like that. If you know the changes, you're going to be able to map them out and find your niche to provide the most value for people during these changes. And again, this is kind of what our crops are going to be looking like in the next few years. This is what our crops are going to be like in the next few. This is what we're going to be harvesting in like October, this kind of snow, when our crops are still in the fields. Now, we know where the changes were before. Obviously, you see in this map. Now, what the kind of research I do is I even look down like Bohemia. This is in central Germany. And then you can see the wheat, the barley, the oats, the rye. And the Grand Solar Minimums here. And you can see which ones decline on which timelines. So you can start to get an idea of which grains will be most affected in which regions. And you start pinpointing dots. So you got this in central France. You got it in central Germany. You got it in the Czech Republic. You got it in Russia. So you can start to map out where the losses are. And if you do any options trading, you can kind of see where the main crops are in the countries and then go long or short depending on delivery calls for something out in 2020, whatever. So I focus on the wine production in France, Germany, and Austria. Again, this was 2017, and I was predicting massive losses in here, and that's happening right now. Again, 2017, these are the calls that I called Alberta, the central grow zones, which we got the massive floods and delayed planting, and then right up here in the Great Lakes. And Newfoundland up here is offline already, pretty much. Australia, these are the main wheat growing belts. And somebody sent me an email today when I checked. This is the first time Australia is turning into an importer because they've lost so much grain production. And Kevin Long and I had a great interview, and he talked about this area here. They're expecting 7 more years of drought down here, so the rest of this is going offline. And West Australia this year has experienced extreme losses due to cold and excessive winds and Antarctic storms that are out of season. We saw this in China, so you can expect the Chinese dynasties to go. Now we've got 2 choices. And I'll wrap up right here. We've got 2 choices. We can move our grow belts south, which we're going to have to do, but each 1 degree Celsius temperature drop means 140 miles push south. They're expecting a 3C drop. So we're gonna have to move our agriculture almost 400 miles south of where it presently is. I'm a fan of using hemp for that. We can get protein out of it, and it grows a lot of bands and zones that are hardy for other plants. So that's about all the time I have, except I'm doing some of my own grow stuff here. I'm working on a magnetic motor to be able to power the devices independently off grid. And then I want to couple that with Brad Buttrick's new all-in-one LED grow spectrum light, and then put it out as a kit where you got the magnetic motor, you got the new efficient grow lights, and then you got vertical tubes indoors. That's what I'm working on. It'll all be for free. I'm just going to give away the designs. But anyway, thanks for listening. Thank you very much.